Great, thank you very much, Willy and Astrid. So we can move on to some discussion now. For those of you who'd like to ask a question using the audio, you can put your hand up to let me know. And I'm going to try and take some questions from the chat as well. Here's a question from KM. You can maybe introduce yourself further, but what has been your experience regarding cooperation between different sectors like water and energy? How do you overcome conflicts of interest and power asymmetries? Or do you have any recommendations for governance approaches? Astrid, your microphone isn't, you have to turn off your mute. You're still muted. There we go.
Would you like to answer? Or
yep.
It's okay. She's on now.
Either of you,
can
go
you
ahead.
hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I think how do you overcome or how do you work with different sectors? You have to have stakeholders. You have to bring the main actors of the different sectors together, and you have to think when there is at a national level plans developed for water, we have to think about the energy implications in water, and you have to do this vice versa. And how do we do this? Like I can just, I'm sorry, but I can talk like from a GIZ point of view. Like we do work very closely with within the ministries, and this is then when you work that closely and within the ministry, then you can support that joint planning, which is ultimately the nexus approach, where you're thinking about the water, energy, and the food implications of the plans for the future.
Great. We have a question from Brian. Would you like to go ahead?
Let's see.
Hi,
So
can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Very good. As this is a SuSanA A discussion, I was most interested to see, and I thank you for your comments so far, but using sanitation itself, especially ecological sanitation, as a means to mitigate for rural people at a household level is something that I think we really need to raise. Some years ago from Malawi, we saw that for people who were practicing eco-san could actually boost their food production by between 2 to 4 months. And this was as much to do with the fact that eco-san fertilizer actually boosts the moisture holding capacity of the soil as to do with the nutritional content of the product. So there's something there. Yes, this is at household level, but if you build up enough households, of course, it starts to become useful with many, many more people. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your contribution. Yeah, I'm also sorry that it was quite generic, but I guess, I mean, what you were just saying, it's like you reintroduce carbon and nutrients into agricultural practices, and you boost through the combination of not just the nitrogen, the phosphorus, but also the carbon, you boost growth. And the other point I think that we think has to be looked at closer is in terms of mitigation from what is actually the impact from decentralized system or from the septic tanks in terms on global greenhouse gases. In terms of the source, it's the methane, but there is much controversy in terms of quantifying it. So we are actually trying to look closer now in terms of actually quantifying it from a mitigation point of view. And the whole reason for this is just to make the link again to climate financing is we have to they're pretty thorough about clear targets and quantifications for accessing some of those funds.
We have a question here about affordability, and given that many water systems or many people don't have access to these systems because of affordability issues, is making these systems more sustainable even possible given the current financing situation? This is from Samson. Yeah.
Which one is the one from Samsung? Or? Yeah, I mean, also we want to change a little bit this point of view. We know that utilities and in general water projects face the problem of financial sustainability because it's difficult to get tariffs. It's difficult to really put what is the real value for the resource water. But then that is the reason I also highlight that we have to change a little bit this view, and we have to go to the impact that the projects can have. And what is important is to ensure that at least the projects are sustainable over time. And we know that the projects get sometimes resources from the government or from donors, and the important is to direct in this way. I mean, we're not expecting the projects to be profitable. We expect that the projects can operate, at least for the lifetime, in an appropriate way and provide the services they have to provide. And at the end, is what is a fancy word we're saying, is to lead to this transformational change, to maybe with the years achieve some changes and make people, governments, end users, to really give the value to the water resource at the end and try to find ways to make this sustainable from the point of view of the finance. I mean, we know it's a very challenging sector, but I think with kind of some work we can identify how we can quantify, for example, also the co-benefits that we can achieve. We can put a price or kind of quantify the impacts for these benefits, and then incorporate this, and then at the end maybe, okay, you don't have really revenues in terms of money, but then you can have a bigger impact.
If anyone else would like to jump in with a comment, you're welcome to do that as well. And you can, like I said, you can put your hand up if you want to ask a question using the audio. We have time for maybe a couple more comments or questions. There is a comment here about whether the health and climate change aspect can make these systems more of a bankable case, if you've seen any work looking at that aspect.
Bankable is an interesting word.
Well,
it depends. Which bank.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, we're still fighting and discussing about what is the proper definition about what is bankable project. That is also we say it's just the project who can attract financial institutions to finance the implementation of the project. So how you attract them to put money into your project is not only about the IRR, NPVs, maybe you have to show something else. Going to the question, where was this question? Maybe someone
So
can
are there any experiences where linkages between climate change and health impacts and sanitation has become a bankable case? This is from Sarah. Hari, if you want to add something, you're welcome to do that. Sarah?
Sarah Harari.
Well, I can jump a little bit. So we have, in the past we were having the carbon markets. We still have the carbon markets that are still active in Africa, where there is a price for the CO2 emissions, so that you can have people or countries or companies who are willing to buy the emissions you reduce from your projects. Now also there's a big trend on putting price to the emissions you have in your own country. So I think sooner than later we will start to see kind of financial mechanisms pushing companies to be more efficient in terms of greenhouse gases emissions. Then, so that's the first thing. And then third, we have also the NDCs, where the countries have set targets in terms of emission reductions over time. So in that sense, the greenhouse gases quantification and valorizations are kind of included in the big picture. In terms of health, I think there we still have to do some work, because even we know that by having or providing clean water to a family, we are reducing the impact on diseases. The correlation or the direct link between, okay, we have clean water in one side, and then the Ministry of Health or the hospitals are receiving less people from people that come from diseases generated by dirty water, this link is still not fully operational. And we are working on that. We're working on these co-benefits in how we can find that the production of clean water and treatment of the wastewater in a good manner impacts then on the reduction on the budget that countries spend for health services. But I think, this is something I have to say, in the SuSanA library, I saw a couple of documents that are addressing this issue. One of the I don't have the titles right now, but I think it's something that is a work in progress, and I don't know if any of you, even of the tenants, have kind of a specific experience on that.
You can.
And I don't know, Astrid, you want to add something else?
Yeah, Willy, you can add those titles on the chat in the forum, in the SuSanA forum, where this.
I will try to find it. Yeah.
So you can add those a little bit later, where the video is.
Yeah.
I think we're running out of time, so maybe we can just close with a few more, if you have any further comments on decentralization, because I've seen that there's a few comments and questions here about calculating emissions and leapfrogging technologies, and also for countries like India, for instance, where there is going to be a large technology investment in the near future, and the importance of that technology lock-in. So maybe if you could just comment further on the decentralization question.
And there's a comment from Karim as well.
So my comment to this is that we have currently, in the past 2 years, mostly worked on the urban water cycle and on a centralized solution. We are now starting to look into, and we came across, what are the emissions in septic tanks, in latrines, what's actually happening, what's happening with fecal sludge, and we're trying to look at that. We're looking at, wetlands, but we think it is a considerable amount of emissions. But I think this is kind of like, to put like a number to it, I couldn't say that yet. We're looking at what are the sources, and from the sources point of view, it is methane. We had a quick look at nitrous oxide, which was also a comment about the global warming potential, and I think this is it is very important. Like methane actually is 25 times the potential than CO2, while nitrous oxide actually is 298 times in terms of the global warming potential compared to CO2. So there may be very little concentration of nitrous oxide, but it may have a huge potential.
Great, thanks.
And just what about the...
Yeah? Maybe another
just
one
what
last...
this issue about where to calculate? We're using at least the initial reference is the guidelines for greenhouse gases emissions calculation from IPCC 2006.
So perhaps maybe one last comment from our side. It is kind of like starting to look at the water sector from a different dimension because we're looking at the emissions, which has, there is not much out there looking from that dimension of emissions. And what is, in my opinion, also relevant is kind of like when we're looking from the emission point of view and we're thinking about, nutrient recovery and resource recovery, then reusing those nutrients or reusing that carbon because it had a better capacity for holding water. It's also avoiding. It also supports or contributes to avoiding emissions that would have been produced by producing fertilizers, for example.
I also would like to give a final comment also regarding all these issues about financing. And that's something I forgot to mention is, yes, I mean, we rely a lot in the governments to get our money. We rely a lot on subsidies, also tariffs. So I think it's important for many of you to look to climate finance. I think it's a good chance to identify financial instruments and financial institutions that are able maybe to provide the resources you need to implement your project. If you change the point of view, the project is going to be the same. The project is going to be implement pumps, do wastewater treatment. But if you add the mitigation component into your project, if you are able to quantify in a clear way, maybe the access to climate finance can help to make your projects become real.
You have
Great.
Karen?
Thank you. I think we're running out of time, actually, so I think we have to wrap things up here, but I know that there's some questions we didn't get to, and you're welcome to post those on the forum, and we can continue this discussion. I want to thank all of you for joining today, for your attention and your questions, and especially for the presenters, Astrid and Willy. Thank you very much for your interesting presentations. And I hope to see you all at the next SuSanA webinar, which will be in January. So thank you.
My question really is about getting finance for this project. And a suggestion will be, as Willy said, the carbon finance, the finances available are not channeled directly to the areas or those that need them. What someone suggested there was a shift from the centralized processing to a decentralized one, where if you can have small-scale separated management sources, take the urine diversion for instance. If it's done at an household level where it is congregated on a community level, now, and a business is built around that to convert urine, that is, the bulk of it is nitrogen, ratio 10:1, and then we can find a way of making it a more balanced fertilizer. Then, where the funding for the pilot comes from the finances of areas that Willy has said, then we can start to build a market or value chain around this on a community basis. And really, getting that kind of financing is where the problem lies. So how do you go about it?
That's a good question. Does GIZ have an answer for that?
Or anyone else?
I think, yeah.
But that's an interesting way of starting from the bottom and go up and maybe integrate over many different kinds of services, not just sanitation and water, but energy and housing and transportation and a lot of these things that have to do with the consumer. It's a motor for change.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, it's a valid idea. It's a great idea. The problem there is, first, you are adding a level of complication because you are adding different sectors. You need expertise for each of the sectors. I think the idea to start from a small and going to big is a good option because even I think in terms of resources or financial resources, maybe you can get money for a pilot. And then this pilot can help you to eliminate some barriers you're facing. market barriers, technology barriers, financial barriers, awareness barriers, because people sometimes even they don't know that the technologies can help them. So I think pilots work. So far, also you can design in the medium and long term the option to escalate. So as I mentioned, is to make this thing bigger, because at the end, if your project affects only 100 people, it's good just to show it. But then to have a real impact on the target to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, and also to lead to these changes in society, maybe then we need to think in that further phases that will have to involve regions, states, countries, or even parts of the subcontinent. I like the idea of pilots. They face problems, and then the thing I personally don't like is just you find in sanitation, transport, energy, sometimes there's correlations because you have like energy, you can capture methane to generate heat or something, but this is kind of linked. But if you use different sectors, it's difficult so then to monitor which component is developing, which other is not developing so fast. So you have a lot of problems in operationalize the interaction with different sectors. That is the reason also we prefer to focus on specific sectors and see how they evolve. But yeah, any idea at the end is good so far. You can put it in paper and yeah, make sense of it. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Astrid and Willy. I think interesting discussion. A lot of people are interested from coming from different places. So I will be sharing the link to the video on the forum, and I'll try and add some questions if they weren't answered, and I'll send that link to you so that you can follow up if there's questions that you want to answer. So thanks very much.
Great.